I have a lot of people have asked me for pardons. I call him Puff Daddy has asked me for a pardon.
If you're trying to understand what's really happening with Diddy right now, you need to forget the surface level headlines, because the situation behind the scenes is far more chaotic than most people realize. What's unfolding isn't just one legal battle or a celebrity serving time quietly. It's a multi-front collapse happening all at once. His lawyers are fighting aggressively in court. His inner circle is fracturing. New allegations continue to surface even while he's locked up. Assets are being liquidated, family members are making sudden and alarming moves, and there are now serious concerns about his safety behind bars. On top of that, new images and information are circulating online that could directly impact how long he remains in prison. This isn't damage control anymore, this is a scramble. As it stands right now, Diddy is serving a federal sentence of just over 50 months, a little more than 4 years. That sentence came after a jury convicted him on 2 counts related to transportation to engage in prostitution, while acquitting him on the most severe charges he initially faced. To his legal team, that distinction matters more than anything. They've been arguing relentlessly that the punishment doesn't match the convictions, and that what's happening to him now is less about the specific charges and more about the judge's interpretation of his overall behavior and reputation. That's where the tension is exploding. From the defense's perspective, Diddy's being punished for things the jury explicitly rejected. They argue that while jurors did not find him guilty of racketeering or sex trafficking, the court still treated him as if he were. In their view, the sentence reflects moral judgment rather than legal restraint, and they're not being subtle about it. They've accused the judge of acting like an extra juror, weighing evidence that was never supposed to factor into sentencing for the crimes he was actually convicted of. The prosecution, on the other hand, is holding firm. Their position is simple and unyielding. They believe the evidence presented during trial was more than sufficient to justify their sentence, regardless of which charges resulted in convictions. From their standpoint, the jury clearly established a pattern of behavior involving the transportation of individuals across state and international lines for sexual activity, and the law does not require financial profit or traditional pimping for those actions to qualify as criminal. In other words, intent and conduct matter more than labels. What makes this fight especially volatile is the defense's new demand. They're no longer just asking for a reduced sentence, they're pushing for Diddy's immediate release. They want the convictions overturned, or at the very least, a drastically shortened sentence.
Sean Combs wants to argue the law is somehow deficient. That's an argument you make months ago before the case goes to trial. Now that it's been to trial, he was acquitted, you'll recall, on the most serious charges he faced, but that he's been convicted on these transportation to engage in prostitution counts. They say there was plenty of evidence about freak-offs, hotel nights, all the male escorts that Combs and his girlfriends, Cassie Ventura and the woman known as Jane, ended up hiring, transporting to various hotels around the world for sex. That was more than sufficient evidence to convict.
Now, his attorneys are basically saying he was no pimp, he didn't make any profit off of this, it's not the intention of the law. What does the judge have to consider now?
Well, the judge, I think, can consider, I suppose, whether the defense is right, whether transportation to engage in prostitution means that you're going to be pimping these prostitutes out so you can make some money. And the defense said that's just not the evidence here. Sean Combs was the client, and he did it for his own voyeurism because he wanted to watch these male escorts have sex with his then girlfriends, according to the evidence. And prosecutors say it doesn't really matter. The law does not say you have to be a pimp in order to be convicted of these counts. And they say if the defense wanted to argue that, now's not the...
Their filings argue that sentences for similar offenses are typically far lower, often under 15 months, even in cases involving coercion. In Diddy's case, the jury did not find coercion, yet he received a sentence that dwarfs those precedents. To his attorneys, that's not just unfair, it's excessive to the point of being legally questionable. And this isn't a symbolic appeal, it's aggressive and detailed. Dozens of pages arguing that the court improperly allowed testimony and allegations related to conduct Diddy was never convicted of to influence the final sentence. If the appeals court agrees, even partially, it could significantly reduce his time behind bars. That's why this moment matters so much. The outcome of these motions could reshape everything. While that courtroom battle is unfolding, chaos continues outside the legal arena. One of the most striking developments has been the sudden announcement involving Diddy's son, who has reportedly expressed intentions to leave the United States altogether. The timing raised eyebrows immediately. Families don't make moves like that casually, especially when a high-profile federal case is still active. To many observers, it looks like an attempt to create distance, both physically and legally, from a situation that's becoming more radioactive by the day. At the same time, reports have surfaced that Diddy has begun selling off major assets, including his private jet. That's not a symbolic gesture. For someone like him, a private jet isn't just luxury, it's infrastructure. It represents mobility, status, and control. Liquidating it signals either a need for massive legal funding or preparation for a much longer period of instability. Either way, it suggests that even his inner circle doesn't believe the situation will resolve quickly. Then there are the allegations that refuse to stop coming. Even while incarcerated, new claims are emerging, some tied to past events that were never fully examined, others linked to individuals who are only now stepping forward. That alone complicates his defense's argument that he's already paid enough for his actions. Each new allegation adds weight to the prosecution's insistence that the sentence reflects a broader pattern, not an isolated lapse. Perhaps the most alarming detail, however, is what's been reported about his safety in prison. Accounts of a violent incident inside his cell have circulated, with claims that he was attacked in a way that raised serious concerns about his well-being. Whether fully verified or not, the fact that such reports exist underscores how precarious his position has become. This isn't a celebrity serving time in quiet obscurity. This is someone whose presence alone creates tension, resentment, and risk inside a federal facility.
Hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs. His defense team is seeking his immediate release from federal prison, calling his 50-month sentence on charges of transportation for prostitution excessive. CB Cotton has the details live from our New York newsroom. Good to see you, CB.
Hey, Lydia. Well, once one of the most powerful names in hip-hop, Sean Diddy Combs is now behind bars at that federal facility in Fort Dix, New Jersey, but his legal team says he should have never been sent there for this long. So on Tuesday, in an 84-page filing, Combs' attorneys asked a New York federal appeals court to immediately release Combs and send the case back for a new sentencing or grant him an acquittal. In July, a jury found Combs guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution and acquitted him of the most serious charges, racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. In the fall, the judge then sentenced Combs to a little more than 4 years behind bars, citing testimony from former girlfriends who said they felt pressured to participate in drug-fueled sex parties with male escorts called hotel nights or freak-offs. But the rapper's lawyers argue this sentence was punishment for crimes that the jury rejected. They wrote in the filing, quote, "He sits in prison today serving a 50-month sentence because the district judge acted as a 13th juror. The judge defied the jury's verdict and found Combs, quote, coerced, exploited, and forced his girlfriends to have sex and led a criminal conspiracy," end quote. Throughout the appeal, Combs' attorneys go on to describe the case as an unfair prosecution of consensual sex between adults. We're monitoring to see whether prosecutors file a reply to these arguments from Combs' defense team, but we know during the trial that prosecutors repeatedly accused the former hip-hop mogul of trying to minimize his actions. For now, Combs remains in prison with a projected release date for early 2020.
Adding another layer of complexity, there's been public discussion involving former President Trump and the issue of pardons. While some high-profile figures have sought clemency in the past, the response in this case was blunt. There would be no pardon, that door is closed, and that matters because it eliminates one of the last escape routes people speculated about when Diddy was first sentenced. Without political intervention, his fate rests entirely in the hands of the courts. Now, new photos circulating online have reignited public interest, images that show him looking markedly different from his pre-prison life, thinner, more guarded, less untouchable. While photos alone don't change the legal outcomes, perception matters, and perception influences everything from judicial tone to public pressure. These images feed the narrative that this isn't just a temporary setback, it's a fall. What's becoming increasingly clear is that Diddy's legal team is betting everything on technical arguments. They're not trying to relitigate public opinion. They're focused on statutory interpretation, sentencing guidelines, and procedural fairness. If they succeed, even partially, it could mean a reduced sentence or a resentencing hearing that cuts years off his time. But if they fail, the opposite happens. The sentence stands, the narrative hardens, and every new allegation, every asset sale, every family member distancing themselves becomes part of a story that no appeal can undo. This is no longer just about what Diddy did or didn't do. It's about how the system responds when someone who once controlled rooms, narratives, and industries loses that control completely. Whether the courts decide his punishment was excessive or justified will ripple far beyond him. It will shape how similar cases are handled in the future, especially when wealth, influence, and reputation collide with federal law. Right now, everything is still in motion. Appeals pending, motions under review, new information surfacing, and the reality is the next few decisions could determine whether Diddy serves most of his sentence, sees it cut dramatically, or walks free far earlier than anyone expected. This isn't a settled story, it's a live one, and every update matters more than the last. At the center of Diddy's appeal is one explosive accusation that his legal team keeps hammering on. They argue that the judge went far beyond the jury's actual verdict. According to the defense, the court effectively rewrote the outcome of the trial by concluding that Diddy coerced, exploited, and forced his girlfriends into sexual activity and led what was described as a criminal conspiracy. That language, they say, directly contradicts what the jury decided. From their perspective, this wasn't a conviction based on those findings, yet the sentence reflects them anyway. Throughout the appeal filings, Diddy's attorneys paint the case as an overreach. They frame it as a prosecution that blurred the line between criminal behavior and consensual relationships between adults. They argued that the government took morally controversial conduct and stretched it into something far more sinister than what the law actually supports. In their view, the punishment wasn't about the specific charges Diddy was found guilty of.
Nigeria, Ghana,
South Africa.
moving away from the country or within the country?
Yeah, Africa. I am moving to Africa.
Is this due to pressure or?
Pressure from,
I mean, you know, the whole drama.
yeah.
I ain't gonna lie, that would piss me off.
I'm pissed off,
like,
Dad.
hold out on
I'm
me,
pissed off,
Pop.
man.
I don't care about all that. I always wanted to spend some time in Africa.
Oh, for real? So where? Nigeria, Ghana.
Probably South Africa. Better living condition, better housing. Overall, safer to live than others.
Nigeria is great too. I got a couple of great properties in Nigeria.
But about punishing him for a broader narrative, the prosecution failed to fully prove at trial. Prosecutors, of course, see it very differently. During the trial, they repeatedly accused Diddy of minimizing his actions, downplaying the impact of his behavior, and hiding behind technicalities. They argued that the evidence showed a clear pattern of control, pressure, and manipulation, even if the jury didn't convict on every charge. And while the appeals process is still unfolding, prosecutors are expected to respond forcefully to the defense's claims once the court formally considers the arguments. For now, Diddy remains in federal prison with a projected release date in early 2028. That timeline, however, is exactly what his legal team is trying to disrupt. They've asked the appeals court to take one of three drastic steps: overturn the convictions entirely, order his immediate release, or send the case back to the original judge with instructions to significantly reduce the sentence. It's a high-risk strategy, but it shows just how much they're willing to gamble to shorten his time behind bars. At this stage, the appeals court hasn't even heard oral arguments yet. Everything is still in its early procedural phase. But the sheer volume and intensity of the filings make one thing clear: Diddy's team isn't holding anything back. They're throwing every legal argument they can at the wall, hoping at least one sticks. Watching it unfold feels less like a routine appeal and more like a chess match where every move could change the entire board. While that legal battle plays out, the fallout has spilled far beyond the courtroom. Diddy's family is now facing consequences of their own, and what his son recently announced sent shockwaves through people following the case. King Combs finally broke his silence, and when he did, it wasn't subtle. He revealed plans to relocate the entire Combs family out of the United States. Not just a temporary move, a full-scale departure. According to him, the destination isn't just one country but Africa, with South Africa being a primary focus. He openly explained that the pressure, backlash, and hostility surrounding the Combs name in America have become overwhelming.
Welcome back to ABC News Live reports. Sean Diddy Combs is facing new sexual assault allegations. The LA Sheriff's Department says that it's investigating a report from an alleged victim in Florida. That alleged victim has identified himself as music producer Jonathan Hay in social media posts that have since been removed. A spokesperson for Combs has not responded to ABC News' request for comment. Combs is currently serving a federal prison sentence after he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution earlier this year. Let's bring in ABC News legal contributor and trial attorney Brian Buckmeyer for more on this. So, Brian, this accuser says he's already listed as John Doe in a civil case against Combs. So talk about how that could impact this investigation now that he's also has identified himself, too.
Yeah, so the only impact that I can see on this investigation will now be that law enforcement will know who to speak with. But he already reached out to law enforcement in Florida that's been working in conjunction with LA where the alleged crime has occurred. And so the impact of him making notice that he also has a civil case doesn't really affect one or the other. If anything, it affects the potential civil case, because with a typical civil case, you just have lawyers doing the investigation. Now you have the full force and power of the LAPD doing part of the investigation, and their criminal investigation could help create more information that he could go forward in a civil case.
So CJ Wallace, the son of rapper Notorious B.I.G., filed a countersuit against Hay. Hay claims that Wallace and Combs took part in an alleged assault in 2021. Wallace calls Hay's allegations a, quote, calculated smear campaign. Talk to us how that kind of factors into this case.
Yeah, so here you have a cross-complaint from a civil matter where you have an original case where Hay is saying that not only Sean Combs, but CJ Wallace, the son of Notorious B.I.G., was a part of these sexual allegations. In terms of them going back and forth, you'll see a cross-complaint in the sense of filing for damages for either claim. You'll go through the typical process of sitting down for depositions, accounting for discovery that may come about. But because Sean Combs has been tried for a federal crime, is currently now in Fort Dix, New Jersey, serving a 15-month sentence, this civil lawsuit, along with many others, have been on pause. And so these countersuits and original suit may just sit in limbo for some time.
In his words, the environment feels hostile, unsafe, and poisoned by public opinion. He didn't deny that the ongoing scandal played a role. In fact, he acknowledged it directly. What stood out most was who he blamed. King Combs pointed the finger squarely at 50 Cent, specifically citing the Netflix documentary that aired Diddy's alleged behavior to a global audience. He described the project as disheartening and disgraceful, arguing that it amplified accusations and cemented a negative image that the family can't escape. From his perspective, that documentary didn't just expose allegations, it reshaped how millions of people see the Combs name. And whether people agree with him or not, the impact is undeniable. That documentary didn't just hurt Diddy's reputation, it rippled outward, affecting his children, his extended family, and anyone still tied to his legacy. A name that once symbolized power, wealth, and influence now carries so much baggage that his own son feels the only solution is leaving the country entirely. It's a stunning reversal. This was a family that embodied the American dream at its peak. Mansions, private jets, elite access, and cultural dominance. Now they're talking openly about starting over on another continent to escape the stigma attached to their last name. That alone speaks volumes about how far public perception has shifted. But relocation won't erase the story. The internet doesn't have borders, neither do federal investigations. And while the family may hope distance brings relief, the legal reality continues to follow them. As if the situation weren't already dire, things escalated further when new allegations surfaced while Diddy remains incarcerated. A man named Jonathan Hay from Florida reportedly contacted law enforcement with serious accusations of sexual assault.
Sold his Gulfstream G550, that's a PJ for the brokies out there, in October of 2025. Nia, you got the final sale price. It says it was not disclosed on the paper, but you got new information.
Well, listen, it runs from between 20 million to 30 million. Of course, they did not tell us what the final sale was. And it's also anonymous. We don't know who bought it.
Authorities have confirmed that the case is under investigation, adding yet another layer of legal jeopardy to an already collapsing situation. This is the part that makes Diddy's appeal even more precarious. Judges don't operate in a vacuum. While new allegations aren't part of the current conviction, they contribute to the broader picture surrounding a defendant. Each new claim reinforces the prosecution's narrative that the sentence reflects a pattern, not an anomaly. Taken together, these developments paint a grim picture. Diddy's legal team is fighting aggressively. His family is planning an international exit. His assets are being sold. His reputation is in free fall, and new accusations continue to surface. The appeals court could still rule in his favor, but the momentum right now is moving in the opposite direction. This isn't just about whether Diddy serves 4 years or less. It's about whether the system sees him as a man unfairly punished for consensual behavior, or as someone whose power allowed him to operate unchecked for too long. That question will ultimately decide whether his sentence stands, gets reduced, or unravels entirely. And until the appeals court weighs in, everything remains on edge. Every filing, every allegation, every public statement adds pressure. The empire that once looked untouchable is now being dismantled piece by piece, not just by courts, but by consequences that reach far beyond prison walls. A spokesperson for Sean Combs has still refused to comment, and that silence is starting to feel louder than any denial ever could. As of now, Combs remains in federal custody, serving a sentence tied to his conviction for transportation to engage in prostitution earlier this year. And while his team continues to fight the ruling, the legal fallout around him isn't slowing down. It's multiplying. One of the most unsettling developments is the emergence of a new accuser who has now stepped out of the shadows. This individual was already listed as John Doe in a civil lawsuit connected to Combs, but by publicly identifying himself, the case has taken on an entirely new dimension. Legal analysts point out that this move doesn't necessarily change the core of the investigation, but it does sharpen it. Law enforcement no longer has to work around anonymity. They now know exactly who to speak with, where to look, and how to coordinate across jurisdictions. What makes this situation even heavier is that this wasn't some vague complaint filed in passing. The accuser had already reached out to authorities in Florida, who are now working alongside investigators in Los Angeles, where the alleged incident is said to have occurred. In civil cases, investigations usually move at a slower pace, handled mostly by attorneys and private inquiries, but once criminal investigators get involved, the entire dynamic shifts. The LAPD now has the authority to subpoena, collect evidence, and dig far deeper than a civil team ever could. That means information uncovered here could later feed directly back into civil litigation, strengthening those cases significantly. And just when it seemed like the focus was solely on Combs, another familiar name was pulled into the storm. CJ Wallace, the son of the late the notorious Big, has now been named in the allegations. According to the accuser, Wallace was involved alongside Combs in an alleged assault dating back to 2021. That detail alone sent shockwaves through the industry.
Trump did say he's not planning to commute the mogul sentence. He didn't say why, but it's a move the president has been thinking about for months. Here's what he told reporters during Diddy's marathon trial in May.
He used to really like me a lot. I don't know. I would certainly look at the facts. If I think somebody was mistreated, whether they like me or don't like me, it wouldn't have any impact.
Wallace has been connected to Combs for years, both personally and professionally, and until now his name had largely stayed out of the controversy. Wallace didn't respond quietly. Instead, he launched an aggressive counteroffensive, filing a countersuit against the accuser and branding the allegations as a calculated smear campaign. His legal team insists the claims are completely fabricated and designed to destroy his reputation by association. And now, the situation has turned into a legal standoff. Lawsuits moving in both directions, accusations clashing, and the truth buried somewhere under layers of competing narratives. The LAPD is still actively investigating, attempting to piece together what actually happened. But here's the problem: because Combs is already incarcerated on federal charges, many of these civil cases are effectively frozen in place. Courts tend to prioritize the primary criminal sentence, meaning additional lawsuits and countersuits may sit unresolved for years. For anyone waiting for clarity or wishing you, especially if real victims are involved, the delay is brutal. And this is where the domino effect becomes impossible to ignore. Each new allegation adds weight to an already overwhelming pile of legal problems. Each new name dragged in expands the circle. What once it looked like isolated accusations is starting to resemble a network of unresolved claims, all orbiting the same figure. Then there's the money, because no matter how powerful someone once was, legal battles burn through cash fast. And the word has now spread that Combs has sold his private jet, a Gulfstream G550, to an anonymous buyer. The estimated sale price sits somewhere between $20 and $30 million. For most people, that's generational wealth. For someone who once lived at billionaire adjacent levels, it's a red flag. This wasn't a casual sale. It wasn't a lifestyle decision. Sources close to the situation say the jet was sold under legal pressure purely to raise funds. High-powered legal teams don't come cheap, especially when you're fighting multiple cases across different courts. And that jet wasn't just a luxury item, it was an income stream. It had been rented out regularly, generating millions per year. By selling it, Combs didn't just lose an asset, he cut off future revenue. And it didn't stop there.
If you listen to people close to Diddy, been the victim of violence behind bars. So there was an incident that we first learned about about 2 weeks ago during Diddy's sentencing hearing, and he said, I was sleeping in my bed in the prison. It's a federal detention facility in Brooklyn called MDC Brooklyn, and there are federal inmates who are in many cases waiting for their trial as well. And Diddy claimed that somebody held a knife to his throat. He woke up and this guy basically had him, and he had the knife, and Diddy was at this person's mercy. Now, it's unclear what exactly happened from there. Was there a guard that came in? Did Diddy somehow fight this person off? Well, seems unlikely that happened. Or did the person just leave? Bottom line, this guy, at least according to people close to Diddy and Diddy himself, could have hurt him badly or even taken his life. And I think that was something they wanted known during the hearing because they wanted the judge to take some pity on Diddy. It probably didn't help ultimately because he does get the 4+ year sentence. But again, this just is something that is the reality of life for Diddy right now. It's a guy who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars who is now living in a prison cell and will be at least, again, for the next 2.5 years or so.
Reports surfaced that weeks before the jet sale, Combs had drastically tightened financial access for his own children, placing them on strict allowances. That's not something someone does unless cash flow has become a serious concern. When the legal meter keeps running and no new income is coming in, even massive empires start to crack. Think about the scale of this fall. This is a man who once owned multiple businesses, endorsement deals, publishing rights, and constant royalty streams. Now he's liquidating assets just to stay afloat. That's how quickly legal trouble can dismantle decades of wealth. And when you're trapped in that position, you start searching for exits. Any exit, that's where Donald Trump enters the story. According to multiple reports, Combs formally requested a presidential pardon for his 50-month federal sentence. A pardon would have wiped the slate clean, freedom, restored rights, the ultimate escape hatch. But that request went nowhere. Trump publicly stated that while he would look at the facts, he had no plans to intervene. And realistically, the political cost of pardoning someone convicted on charges this explosive would be enormous. That door is shut completely. So now Combs is left with only one hope: appeal. Either his lawyers managed to reduce the sentence or he serves it in full. And then came the most disturbing development yet. Before sentencing, Combs disclosed an incident that allegedly occurred while he was being held at the federal detention center in Brooklyn. According to his account, he was asleep in his cell when another inmate approached and held a knife to his throat. For a moment, he was completely at the person's mercy. Whether the attacker intended to scare him or seriously harm him remains unclear. What is clear is that this wasn't a hypothetical threat, it was real, immediate, and terrifying. That detail was reportedly shared with the court in hopes of leniency. It didn't work, the sentence stood. But the incident revealed something far more important. This is Combs' new reality. No security team, no gated estates, no private chefs, no protection, just a prison cell surrounded by people who may hate him, resent him, or see him as a target. Some inmates have nothing to lose. Some may believe he hurt someone they care about. Some may simply want notoriety. Every day carries risk. That's the true collapse of power. From Bad Boy Records mogul to a man sleeping lightly, hoping he makes it through the night. So now the question isn't just about guilt or innocence anymore. It's about what comes next. Will the appeal actually work? Will more accusers come forward now that the fear factor is gone? Will the civil cases finally move once the criminal chapter closes? And is this really the end, or just the beginning of a much larger reckoning? Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you believe his legal team can pull off a win? Do you think more names are about to surface? And how do you see this story ending? If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This case is still unfolding, and when the next update drops, you won't want to miss it.